Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. On this episode, we have the Cubs on the verge of moving to the next round of the playoffs, the Bears suffering another loss, and we are on the eve of the Blackhawks kicking off another run for the Stanley Cup. All this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? That means you get to see the stars of tomorrow today for family-friendly, affordable pricing. Now, the season is about to kick off, and we're looking for another deep run for the Calder Cup. And the home opener is going to be Saturday, October 22nd against the Milwaukee Admirals. Go to icehogs.com, buy tickets, jerseys, hats, and more, and tell them Swerski Sports sent you. All right, folks, thanks for tuning into another episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I'm going to start this episode off. We're going to talk about the Cubs and their playoff run so far. We're going to kick on over to the Chicago Bears and their game today versus the Indianapolis Colts, and then we're going to wrap it up with a sneak preview of the Blackhawks season opener, which is coming up in a couple of days. And then we will call it a day and get on with our lives. Unless you guys are all living with your heads in the sand and not paying attention to anything, or maybe you don't live in Chicago and don't pay attention. But if you are a living, breathing member of the Chicagoland area society, you know that the Cubs are in the playoffs, and you know things are going well. How well? In a best-of-5 series, they're winning 2-0. It's that good. It's pretty darn good. So, we will talk about the first 2 games and then preview Game 3, which will be tomorrow. I'm recording this Sunday, so it'll be on Monday late night. The game is going to be in San Francisco, so it's going to be a late night game. So we'll talk a little bit about the first 2 games, a little bit about the series as a whole, what we're seeing, what we expect in Game 3, and so on and so forth. Game 1 was basically what I thought it was going to be. Johnny Cueto has had a career year this year. He's looked fantastic. And John Lester has looked absolutely fantastic. I knew that both of these guys, coming into Game 1 of a division series in a chilly Chicago night, that there was not going to be a lot of offense on this night. And we got more than that. I expected like a 3-2 game or a 2-1 game. No, we got a 1-0 game. And it was an absolute gem of a pitching matchup. Johnny Cueto, he pitched a complete game for the Giants, which ended up being 8 innings because the Cubs didn't need a bat in the 9th. But he gave up 3 hits. One of them was a solo home run to Javi Baez to win the game. 10 strikeouts, no walks, which is pretty incredible. And John Lester almost matched it. Well, maybe some ways exceeded it. He pitched 8 innings as well. He had 5 hits, no runs, 5 strikeouts, and Aroldis Chapman came in to save the game. Like I said, it was a brilliant matchup. No walks were issued by either team at all. In fact, as a whole, this series, 2 games completed, only 1 walk has been issued. The Cubs haven't walked anybody. and that's including all the pitchers that came in to replace Hendricks after he got hit by a pitch or hit by a hit batted ball. So 2 pitchers in game 1, Lester and Chapman, and then in game 2, Hendricks, Wood, C.J. Edwards, Mike Montgomery, Rondon, and Chapman all pitched. Nobody has issued a walk. And for the Giants, Johnny Cueto pitched game 1, no walks. Strickland, Lopez, Laws, Castillo, Bloch, Contos, all no walks. The only pitcher that has issued a walk has been Jeff Samardzija, the starter for game 2, which is just absolutely incredible. It's an incredible pitching matchup, and I guess that's what we expected, is because going into the season, everybody was debating who had the better starting rotation. Was it the Cubs or was it the Giants? Most people thought it was the Giants, and I think at the end of the season we kind of concluded that during the regular season it was the Cubs, hands down. Not quite hands down, but pretty much. I think most people will say that the Cubs had a better rotation between Hendricks and John Lester being better than any 2 starters in the regular season on the Giants. Lackey having a great season. Hamill, until the end stretch, had a great season. And Arrieta had a great first half of the season and sort of dropped off in the second. But all that's null and void. This is the postseason. And Lester came through huge. Johnny Cueto was great. He had 1 mistake pitch, and it wasn't even that big of a mistake. It was... pitched it where he wanted it to. It was Javi Baez talked about it after the game. It's what he was expecting because he had seen how Johnny Cueto had been pitching him before, and he was expecting a certain pitch, a certain inside pitch, and he got it and just turned on it quick because we all know Baez, how quick his hands are. You try to get him on an inside fastball, he turned on it and put it out, and it was funny because normally how hard and how clean he got that ball, it should have just gone out on Waveland, but he hit it high, and the wind sort of took it back, and it barely went out. It got caught in the basket, and so he did this amazing bat flip and flipped the bat, and then went, oh crap, it almost didn't go out. What else? What highlights from game 1 is John Lester still has his issues with going to first, but it didn't matter because David Ross looked like a world beater out there, throwing guys out left and right. Just looking, this man, Ross, wants to bring home a World Series championship to Chicago to end his career on. And honestly, if you're a player that's not a superstar player, David Ross has been a long-time role player. He's a very good baseball player. Don't get me wrong. There's no knocks on David Ross. He's had a really long, nice career. He's a great guy, but he's not, the likes of a Barry Bonds or I don't know. I'm drawing blanks on names. Sorry. He's not a guy that's he's not a Mike Schmidt. He's not a Pete Rose. He's not this guy that are just upper echelon guy. So if you're not one of those types of guys, you are an ultimate role playing guy, and the ultimate way you could end your career is probably bringing a World Series to the Chicago Cubs. Can you honestly think of something better? Even if you're a White Sox fan, you know how important this is to the whole world that the Cubs finally bring home a World Series. How momentous this is, how monumental. And for David Ross to be an integral part of that, if that happens, and he's doing everything he can. He is like found a fountain of youth, and it's been fantastic. Game 2, I expected the Cubs to... It was funny, I was talking to my wife earlier. We went out for a date night that night. We had a date night planned for several weeks now. And my mom came up to babysit. And so I was like, you know what? I know the Cubs are on. I'm going to DVR it, come home, watch the end of the game, and then go back and watch what I missed. We went to dinner, and we went to see a comedian, Robert Kelly. If you watch the show Louie, that's on FX, he plays Louie's brother. Very funny guy. and it was down the street from the house at the Portage Theater, which is really nice. So, anyway, I told my wife as we were at dinner, I was like, she said, "What do you expect for the game?" And I said, "You know what? Jeff Samardzija has a lot of good stuff, but I think he's going to get so amped up to play the Cubs because there's former team that he's going to give up a bunch of runs early, and he's not going to last long." And I said, Kyle Hendricks is a phenomenal pitcher. He's having a great season, but he's a soft-throwing pitcher. Soft-throwing pitchers traditionally in the playoffs don't fare that well. So I expect Samardzija to give up a bunch of runs, and I expect Samardzija to get hit much more than he did in the regular season, but the Cubs to win. And I was actually impressed how accurate it was. Samardzija pitched 2 innings, gave up 4 runs, and gave up the only walk this series has seen so far. And Hendricks pitched 3 2/3. He gave up 2 runs on 2 doubles and a sac fly, I believe. And he got hit with a line drive. It's weird because they kept talking about hitting his arm, and I keep watching the replay, and maybe there's another angle that I can't see, but from the angles I'm seeing, looks like it hit him in the rib cage. But they took him out of the game because he felt some discomfort in his pitching motion. They took him out. But he went back, got MRI, got x-rays, everything checks out, and they don't expect him to miss any pitching time. So if necessary, he would pitch a game 5 of this series. I believe, hold on, game 2. Yeah, he wouldn't even pitch again this series. So he's done anyway. Because game 1 was Lester, game 2 Hendricks, game 3 is going to be Arrieta, game 4 is Lackey, then game 5 would be John Lester again. So he's not slated to start anymore in this series anyway. So honestly, if they wanted to, the Cubs could petition Major League Baseball and say, we have an injured player, and they could petition to have another player instituted in his place. Maybe Hamill, maybe Joe Smith, maybe, I don't know, whoever they want. But I doubt they'll do that. Hendricks goes out in the 4th inning. Travis Wood came in, got the last out in the 4th, pitched the 5th, and it was fantastic because he didn't give up any hits, got 2 strikeouts. They kept him in for his at-bat, and he put one out of the park. Just great home run, which is total Travis Wood. He's a really great hitting pitcher. He's actually a pretty good hitter in general, but for a pitcher, he's a fantastic hitter. They pull him out for in the 6th. The C.J. Edwards came in, and he retired the side. Only gave up 1 hit, no walks, no runs. Mike Montgomery came in for the 6th and part of the 7th. Wait, let's see. 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so he pitched the 7th and part of the 8th. Came in, gave up 1 hit, no runs, no walks. Rondon came in and finished off the 8th. Faced 2 batters, got 2 guys out. And then Rondon came in there and struck out. I believe he struck out the side. No, sorry, he got the 2 strikeouts. Sorry, but the Cubs bullpen had looked great, and Jeff Samardzija only pitched 2 innings, so they had to get 6 innings out of their bullpen, and that was the Achilles heel of the San Francisco Giants all season long. They're not a home run hitting team, and they lack a good bullpen. And their bullpen actually did really well. I mean, Samardzija pitched 2, so they had to get 6 innings out. And out of those 6 innings, they only gave up 3 hits. 3 hits and 1 run. And that was a solo home run to Travis Wood. So realistically, you take away the pitchers, and this is a completely different outcome. And that includes Hendricks as well. Hendricks came in and got 2 RBIs on a bases loaded single, a bloop single. What else? Another big difference in this series is defensive prowess. The Cubs have been able to make all the plays that they need to with their gloves, and the Giants really struggled in the outfield yesterday. And that was another big difference. When the Cubs' bats are cold, their pitching has been hot, and their fielding has been great. So it adds another element. Just like in football where they talk about you have to win all three phases. There's three phases in baseball. Pitching, hitting, and fielding. And the Cubs are winning 2 out of 3 hands down. Their pitching and their fielding. And they've eked out winning both games with the bats as well. So that's right now why they're winning 2-0 and heading back to San Francisco for Game 3. What else? Now, looking at Game 3, I was talking with a buddy who's a big baseball fan, and I was saying that Game 3 in a 5-game series is like the absolute pivotal game. Games 1 and 3 are just super important, and I think that's partially why John Lester started Game 1. It was really an important game. You had to come out strong because you can't be the Cubs and lose home field advantage by losing that first game at home. You can't set the tone of losing that first game, and you don't want to go best case scenario be 1-1 going into Game 3 against Madison Bumgarner at San Francisco. You just don't want to be in that position. So it was a pivotal to get that Game 1 win. And now the Cubs have come off and got back-to-back wins in Games 1 and 2. They've got to close the series early. They can't let this go to 5 because it's anything can happen at that point. You look at a Game 5 and you could see a Johnny Cueto come back and pitch another gem like he did in the first game. And if you don't have an equal gem again by John Lester, and John Lester's a phenomenal pitcher and capable of doing that again, but do you want to have to count on pitching a shutout in a Game 5, like an elimination game? I don't think so. So this is going to be important for the Cubs to come out to take that Game 3 or Game 4 and not let this go to a Game 5. Now, looking at Game 3, this is going to be a tough one a little bit. The Cubs they're already in San Francisco. They headed out after last night's game, so they've been there all day today and trying to get acclimated to things. It's going to be a really late start because it's in California, and they want it to be prime time for the California audience. So that means it's going to be, I think it's an 8:30 game start time in Chicago. So it's going to be a late night for Chicago Cubs fans. It's a Monday night. You're already going to be tired from work and starting the work week, and then an 8:30 game. So you're not going to go to bed until about midnight. And it's going to be a tough one too because this is an elimination game for the Giants. And the Giants have won 3 out of the last 6 World Series. And they've got the best postseason pitcher in modern, or in the last decade of baseball. And he's pitching at home in an elimination game. It's going to be absolutely tough for the Cubs. Look what Madison Bumgarner did his last start. That was an elimination game against the Mets. He shut them down. Just absolutely blanked them. What was it, a 2-hitter? 3-hitter? I think it was a 2-hitter. Gave up no walks, no runs. Just completely shut down that Mets roster. And it was funny because in that game, Noah Syndergaard pitched a gem as well, and then he came out and their closer he's the one that blew it. But he shut him down as well. So the only hope that the Cubs really have is that they can blank the Giants as well, because the Giants aren't that great of a hitting team. They're mostly a get on base, double power. They're not home run power. So you got to keep it in the ballpark, play great defense, make them work for all their runs. And opposing Madison Bumgarner in this game for the Cubs is going to be Jake Arrieta, who's last year's Cy Young Award winner. Now, on one hand, you look and you're like, Jake Arrieta has the stuff to go out there and pitch a shutout and match Madison Bumgarner. And once you get to the bullpen, you got to like the Cubs' chances because the Cubs' bullpen is much better than the Giants' bullpen, despite what happened last night. But on the other hand is if you look at Jake Arrieta the last month and a half, 2 months of the season, he's been an average pitcher. Consider this for Jake Arrieta is his last 7 starts. He's 3-3 with a 4.33 ERA with 17 walks and a 1.17 whip. And over his last 15 starts, it's like half of this second half of the season, basically. So the second half of the season, he's 6-6 with a 4.2 ERA and a 1.16 whip. Those aren't very good numbers. I know Jake Arrieta gets frustrated, and I know he wants to see the Jake Arrieta of last year. But the thing is all of us want to see the Jake Arrieta of last year too. We all want to see that. I don't want to see the Jake Arrieta that had imploded his last start and then pissed and moaned at the media and blamed everybody else. I don't want to see that. I don't think anybody wants to see that except maybe the Giants and the Giants fans. It's going to be good for baseball if Arrieta comes out and looks like Arrieta from last year or even the year before. Come out and pitch a great game and match Madison Bumgarner and outduel him. That's what we all want to see. Lock this up early, get some rest back, and then wait for the winner of the Dodgers versus the Nationals. I think that's what we all want to see here, but I don't really expect that. I really expect Jake Arrieta to have another, not an implosion, definitely, but I bet he only lasts five innings and gives up 4 runs. And I have a feeling that going into that 6th, it's going to be 4-1 Giants. And it's going to be, can they knock Madison Bumgarner out of the game? Another issue with the Cubs this season, or this series, it's something that they've been great at all season long, is normally they work the count. They make the pitchers throw a lot of pitches to get them out. They draw a lot of walks. They get on base. And they're not doing that this series. Like I said, tons of strikeouts, and they've only drawn 1 walk in this whole series. So 2 games, they've only drawn 1 walk. And we're used to seeing them draw about 5 walks a game, maybe 6. So that's what they're going to have to do with Madison Bumgarner, is they're going to have to work the count. They're going to have to make him pitch a lot of pitches and hopefully knock him out of the game just by sheer pitch count, and then go to work on the bullpen. I think that's the answer you got to go for. And you're going to need guys to step up. Is if you look, the Cubs is Rizzo hasn't gotten a hit yet in the playoffs. Addison Russell hasn't gotten a hit yet in the playoffs. Fowler, Zobrist, Hayward have a combined 3 hits in the playoffs. The only guys that are hitting for you besides your pitchers are Wilson Contreras, Javi Baez, and Chris Bryant. You can't rely on 3 guys in your pitchers to hit for you every time. You're going to need to bring more offense to the table. And I know that the Cubs' bats get a little cold as the weather gets cold, but you know what? If you're going to have a long run in these playoffs, you're going to be playing in Chicago half those games. So it's going to be cold. It's October in Chicago. There might be snow coming up in some of these games. So you gotta get these hits. And if you're not getting hits, you got to at least draw walks. Get guys on base. Because then when you do finally hit a home run or drive it a double, you're driving multiple runs in. So what's my prediction for the rest of the series? It's going to be tough to beat Madison Bumgarner. Even though his last 3 starts of the regular season, he was 1-0 with a 3.5 or a 3.54 ERA, which is not that great. People actually got to him. But he's pitched 1 postseason game, and he pitched a complete game and blanked the Mets. You looked at Arrieta, his last 3 starts of the regular season, he's 1-2 with a 5 ERA. I don't like the Cubs' chances in that game, but Game 4, it's still going to be in San Francisco, but it's going to be a much better pitching matchup for the Cubs. John Lackey, who I pictured coming in here and pitching a gem in the postseason like he did last year for the Cardinals, and it'll be against Matt Moore, who struggled he struggled this season with a 13-12 record with an over 4 ERA and finished the season just as weak. I like the Cubs' chances by winning this game in Game 4. So 3 games to 1 this series, and Cubs move on to face the Dodgers. I think we'll go from there. Moving on to the Bears. Today the Bears went to Indianapolis to face the Colts, who played last Sunday in London. So you expected them to be a little tired, a little flat from that trip, and didn't get a bye week after that game. But really, it was a back and forth game all day, and ultimately the Colts came out and they won 29-23. Some notes I have about the game just in general before we start breaking down positionally in some of the plays is the mantra of this game for me. What I saw was losing teams find a way to lose, and this Bears team is a losing team. And they've ultimately found a way to lose. Is a lot of dumb penalties. So the Bears were down in the red zone, and you had a great play that would have been a touchdown or at least really close to it, and it was called back because Jordan Howard went out for a block and accidentally got a handful of face mask. It was an incidental thing, not a malicious thing, just in the heat of the blocking caught it, but that's a bad penalty. You had Bobby Massey at the end of the game get a holding call that forced the Bears into a 3rd and long, and they needed a touchdown to win the game and really, really hurt them. You had another really great drive where it was brought back on a Kyle Long hold. Just a lot of dumb penalties. On the other end, on defense, you had you had the Colts pin back, and then you end up giving up a 40-some yard pass because of a blown coverage. You have multiple missed field goals in the game, even with second chances on penalties. You had another dumb penalty with running into the kicker. You had the Cameron Meredith fumble at the end. You had over 500 yards of offense, but you were only able to produce 23 points. So these are the types of things that losing teams do. They don't capitalize on those. The Bears could have overcome 1, maybe 2 of any of those things. But with all those things, it's hard to overcome, especially when you're on the road. If they had been able to make those field goals, then at the end of the game, they're either tied or they're down by 3, and they can kick a field goal to tie this and send this to overtime. Then it's anybody's game. Or if you get down to those red zones, you don't have those penalties, and you put touchdowns instead of field goals, and you win this game. If you make the better coverage and don't blow coverages, then maybe they don't score the 29 points and you win this game. Cameron Meredith doesn't fumble that. Maybe it's a different outcome. There's a lot of what ifs. But losing teams find a way to lose. And the Bears lost the turnover battle today, 1-0. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the position battles, and we'll break down the game a little more. I'm going to start on defenses. Cornerbacks today had mixed results. Bryce Callahan early had a little bit of struggles. He got beat on a natural pick. He missed a tackle, but then he came back strong and made some really great plays, including 2 really phenomenal tackles that prevented the Colts from getting touchdowns. One of them, they ended up getting, I think they got the touchdown afterwards on a blown Adrian Amos play, but the other one is they kicked a field goal. And if he didn't make a spectacular tackle, those go for touchdowns, and the Bears don't have any chance. So Bryce Callahan was a bright spot. Tracy Porter, he had a few blown coverages, but then he had a couple of big pass breakup plays, which were nice. So, up and down for Porter as well. DeAndre Hall was out this game because in practice he rolled his ankle pretty bad, so he was not able to play, which I think was a big loss for the Bears because he's starting to play much better. If you can get more consistency out of Jacoby Glenn with Bryce Callahan the way he's playing, and DeAndre Hall the way he's playing, is you don't have to rely as much on Porter, and you could start doing some better things with your defensive backs. But in this game, Jacoby Glenn pretty silent. Safety play. I know I've had some back and forth banter with one of my Twitter followers who we discussed the Bears quite a bit. We have a completely conflicting view on Adrian Amos. He thinks he's pretty solid. I think the otherwise. But I think today the safety play was pretty horrendous. First of all, Harold Jones-Quartey got benched for poor play, and Chris Przinski brought in, who we all know is terrible. Adrian Amos he looked bad today. There was a few times where the cornerbacks were expecting help, and you didn't even see a safety on the screen when they got in close. There was not even a safety. Sometimes it was hard to break down because I don't have the coach's view of which safety it was, but it's clear based on the cornerback play that they were expecting help, and there was no safety there. So that might have been a Przinski, that might have been a Harold Jones-Quartey, that might have been an Amos. But there was one touchdown where Amos completely blew the coverage and didn't go out with the receiver and left for a wide open play, and Andrew Luck's going to hit that every time. And then there was the long touchdown at the end of the game, the one where they took the ultimate lead to win. That was another blown coverage by Adrian Amos. So there was 2 touchdowns that he was directly linked to, and there was a bad coverage on his play that allowed the Colts to get down to ultimately score a touchdown earlier in the game as well. So Adrian Amos, he needs to play so much better. The Bears expected a lot out of him, and he's not delivering. Granted, he's had some nice plays against the run. He just is not. He's not where he's supposed to be. He started every game last year. You expected, after getting 16 starts in your rookie year, that you should make that leap. But he seems to be hitting that sophomore slump, and that's not good for the Bears, because if he's not the answer at safety, that is another question mark that the Bears have to fill. And that's not good when you're in this rebuilding process. You need these guys to fill holes and play tough. Let's see what else. Inside linebackers, Freeman has been the best Bears defensive player all season long. Danny Trevathan came back from that the thumb surgery, and he looked okay, but he just didn't look like he was 100%. It's not that he played bad. It was just, I can't even find an example of what I'm talking about. He just didn't look 100% comfortable out there. And I don't know if it's his thumb or if he's got some other lingering pain issues or what, but he just didn't look 100% out there to me. Defensive line, they were up and down all day. Is for the first half, they couldn't get any pressure on Andrew Luck. They had a hard time stopping the run. And then they came out from halftime, and I don't know what kind of halftime adjustment they did, or if it was just that Fox lit a fire under their butts, but Willie Young was the one. He came out there and just went to town, got 3 sacks on Luck. Akeem Hicks was in there and got some good pressure. Jonathan Bullard finally made some noise. It's funny, I'm looking at the stats of number of snaps all season long, and he's consistently got snaps every single game, but he's finally doing something with it. And that third quarter and part of the fourth quarter, they got some pressure on him, on Andrew Luck. But then at the end of the game, when it really counted, they couldn't finish the job, and the defensive backs didn't do their part either, and ultimately got scoring drives that won the game. So that was frustrating. So up and down for the defensive line. And then, I guess this sort of an extension of it is, I don't know if you guys saw this, but on the sideline, Harold Jones-Corte and Danny Trevathan got into a fight, and a couple players had to get in the middle of them and break it up, but those two were right in each other's faces going at it. And that's not a good sign. That just shows that this team is frustrated and they're not happy about where they're going and their chances of getting to where they want to be. What else? Offensive line. The offensive line look okay. They opened some really great holes for Jordan Howard. They kept a fairly clean pocket for Brian Hoyer. But this week, what it was that really set the offensive line back was penalties. I think every single offensive line member got a penalty except for maybe Cody Whitehair. I don't think he had one, but Sitton, Long, Massey, Leno, all got penalties, and it was some of them were some costly ones. Long. Tight end play. Zach Miller continues to be the only tight end on this team. Paulson sucks. He's terrible. I don't like him. I'm tired of his face. I don't think he's a very good blocker. He's a terrible receiver, and he missed what should have been a tackle on a special teams play, and he completely blew that earlier in the game. Wide receiver play was fantastic today. You had some really great play. The only caveat to that is the Cameron Meredith fumble, which I could see on the sideline afterwards how much he was upset, because if you watched when they went to the sideline, he was holding a ball and tucking it on the sidelines. And I think he just was upset with himself and was like, I'm going to make this better, and he's clearly working on it. But you had Cameron Meredith, who had 9 catches for 130 yards and a touchdown. Alshon Jeffrey with 5 catches for 77 yards. Zach Miller, 7 for 73. Jordan Howard, 3 for 45. Eddie Royal, 7 for 43. Kadeem Carey, 1 for 15. And Josh Bellamy, 1 for 14. So you saw that Hoyer went to 7 different receivers and threw for a ton of yards in this game. And I want to talk a little bit more about Cameron Meredith. Is he's become the guy that we all expected Marquise Wilson to be. We've all seen flashes from Marquise Wilson, and then injured. Flashes, then injured. Flashes, then injured. And now finally we see a young player who's coming up and actually producing. Again, the team tried the Colts tried to take away Alshon Jeffrey, and it really didn't work, because the Colts are in a real deep flux as far as their defensive backs goes, and they lost a couple more to injury, so they're really a depleted unit. They didn't have the manpower to really take away Alshon Jeffrey. The person that took away Alshon Jeffrey in this game was actually Brian Hoyer, who just didn't go to him as many times. And I get you went to Cameron Meredith and it was great, but Alshon Jeffrey is your biggest offensive weapon on this team, and you need to go to him. You need to ride him out and make sure that he's the one that's leading you down the field. And I understand when there's games where they have a safety over the top and a cornerback underneath, and they're really bracketing him in and doing things like that to work and take him away. I get. And Eddie Royal has to come up big. Cameron Meredith has to come up big. Now injured Kevin White has to come up big. But when in a game where Alshon Jeffrey is not being bracketed, or their bracket's not working, or whatever the case may be, that Alshon Jeffrey is open, you need to make sure you're feeding him the ball. Like, it doesn't matter if Brian Hoyer throws for 300 and whatever yards, that's fine. I mean, he threw for almost 400 yards. If all 400 yards go to Alshon Jeffrey and you win the game, and who cares? Who cares? I mean, that's a total New England Patriots kind of move. Is I will run the same play over and over and over again until you figure out how to stop it. But the Bears' MO has always been, well, if it worked, let's play, sly and then not run it all the time, and then maybe it'll sneak them again. Now, the trick is, if you find a weakness in the other team, is keep exploiting it until they maneuver and change it. It's a chess match. Keep doing the same thing over and over, and if they can't prove that they can stop it, if they finally go and stop it, then you counter that move with whatever shift they did to stop it. So let's say Alshon, and you just keep going to him all day, and they triple cover him to try to take him away. Then, you know what? Send your tight end out to underneath routes and keep going underneath all day long. Whatever the case may be, is match their move with your move. It should be like a chess match. It shouldn't be you beating yourself, being like, well, we're not going to go to a big play with our best receiver who's beating him all day long. Don't want to do that too many times because then they might figure it out. No, keep doing it. Keep going to that well until that well is dry, and then go dig a new well. Have several wells. That's the thing. In the NFL, if a well goes dry, you should have a backup well and a backup well for that backup well. If you have enough backup wells, there's not enough wells that can go dry. You're not drinking that much water. So the wide receivers were great. Jordan Howard was absolutely solid. He had 45 yards receiving and 118 yards rushing. Looks fantastic. The only knock you can have on him is he had that one 50-some yard run, 58-yard run, and he didn't take it to the house. And that was a big knock on him coming out of Indiana, is he didn't have the home run speed. But there's not a ton of wide receivers in this league that do have that home run speed. So he ended up getting a huge run and really set the tone for the Bears offense. Jordan Howard is making this offensive line better, and he's making the quarterback play better. It's just how it goes. And then finally, we'll talk about the quarterback. And this one is going to, I think, piss some people off. Brian Hoyer was 33 for 43 with 397 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Those sound like really great numbers on the surface, but I'm going to say this about Brian Hoyer is he's all fart, no shit. Pardon my French. I think that's really what you get out of him, is he put up almost 400 yards of passing. The Bears had 520 some yards of total offense. They only put 23 points on the board. In some ways, Brian Hoyer is great for this Bears team because he throws the ball away. He's not turning the ball over. He's spreading it out to a lot of receivers. But he doesn't take the risks that you need to be a great offensive team and put a lot of points on the board. Because I don't care how many, if they only have 100 yards of total offense, if they're able to put up 30 points, That's all that matters to me, is how many points are you putting up and how many points are you giving up. And Brian Hoyer just doesn't take any of the risks that sometimes you need to be a great offense. Is you have to have a little bit of that gunslinger mentality, but you have to be able to put it in check at times. Jay doesn't put it in check, goes off the rails sometimes, but he's willing to go out there and try. So in some ways, Jay Cutler is the much superior quarterback to Brian Hoyer, because he will go out there and try to exploit a defense. It's just he doesn't know when to put it in check or not. But Brian Hoyer just doesn't go out there and do risky things. He doesn't throw a ton of balls downfield. It's a lot of screen passes. It's a lot of bubble screens. It's a lot of misdirection. Fake this way and throw a 3-yard out here. And then let the wide receiver or the running back get a lot of yards after the catch. It's not a lot of deep movement down the field. It does keep the ball moving. It does keep the chains moving. It does keep the defense more fresh. But he needs to be able to finish drives. And he needs to not... It's great that he went to 7 different receivers, because that's a knock on Jay Cutler. A big knock on Jay Cutler is he has a guy he's comfortable with and he keeps going to that well. But with Brian Hoyer, he spreads it around a little too much. Is you have your best weapon, one of the better wide receivers in the NFL, and your best offensive weapon by far is Alshon Jeffrey. And Alshon Jeffrey, when he's open, you need to get him the ball. I can't remember if it was the last drive or the second to last drive. It might have been the second to last drive, the one where Meredith fumbled. Is the Bears went to the other side of the field, and if you look, Alshon Jeffrey was wide open going into the end zone. If you got him that ball, you get a touchdown, and you either win or you put the pressure on the Colts. But Hoyer didn't look him over, and you've got to look at Alshon Jeffrey first. He's got to be your primary target. If they take him away, then look over to somebody else. But you always have to identify where Alshon Jeffrey is when you're going down in this offense, unless it's some sort of where it's a goal line thing and you have a specified play. We're going to do a quick out to the tight end, blah, blah, blah. But if you're running your offense, your standard offense, and you're marching down the field, is you need to identify where Alshon Jeffrey is and make sure you look him off before you go to anybody else, because he's your best weapon. He's the best receiver you have, and they didn't have an answer for him. He was too fast for any of their cornerbacks. He's too big for any of their cornerbacks. He's too strong for any of their cornerbacks, and they weren't bracketing him to take him away. So that was a huge knock on Brian Hoyer for not taking advantage of the opportunity you have with Alshon Jeffrey in this lineup. What other things that I want to talk about with this Bears is we didn't talk about it because it happened last week, but the injury to Kevin White. He broke his leg. He's out. He's on injured reserve right now. He's going to be out until at least week 10. And if he opts for surgery, he's done for the season. I have a feeling that he's going to wind up going on injured reserve, coming back for week 10, because I think that's going to be vital for his career. He's already lost one whole season to injury, and he's going to lose most of his second season injury. If he wants to be in this league for a long time and be productive and make the most of his talents, he's got to get better. He was getting better each and every game he was in, and his last game was his best game of his career, and that's when he gets hurt. He needs to come out, and those last 6 games, even if they're not playing for a playoff spot, even if they're not playing for anything, what it's doing is it's getting Kevin White better for next season. So next season he comes in and he's like, you know what? I've already gotten used to the league. I've already made my mistakes as running my routes. I know what I'm supposed to do. I understand the speed of this game. I can go out and hit the ground running. I don't have to. I'm not essentially a rookie anymore. So that's what he needs to do with those last few games of the season. So I think it's important for him, for his trajectory in this NFL, is to come back and not have that surgery. But that's just me. I can't speak for what's best for him. But that's how I see it is best for him in his football career. Bears lost the special teams battle today. Is I mentioned before, there's 3 phases in the NFL. Is you've got your offense, your defense, and special teams. And the Bears were bad in special teams. Connor Barth is an absolute dog turd of a kicker. We'll talk about that in a second. The Bears, the kickoff coverage was not as good as the Colts' kickoff coverage was. And their punt coverage was not nearly as good as the Colts' punt coverage. So the Bears really lost in that special teams battle. And the Colts offense did a little bit better against the Bears defense than the Bears did against the Colts defense. So that's where, why they won this game. Connor Barth. I know I keep hearing people say, this is why you cut Robbie Gould. Robbie Gould is, the two aren't linked together. Is just because Barth sucks doesn't mean Robbie Gould was the answer. And just because Robbie Gould sucked didn't mean that Barth was the answer. Is the Bears need a better kicker than both of them. Neither one of them is the option, is the answer. Is Robbie Gould used to be one of the best kickers in the NFL. He is not anymore. There's a reason he's sitting out and nobody picking him up. There's 32 teams, there's 32 kickers in this league, and nobody thought, oh, you know what, Robbie Gould is better than the option I have. So at best right now, he's the 33rd best kicker in this league because there's 32 other guys that have a job over him. So when you're talking about Connor Barth, don't link him and Robbie Gould. Talk about Connor Barth individually as a person on his own merits. And he may have been a great kicker inside the 40, and that's what they kept bragging about. He's automatic within the 40. Connor Barth is not a good kicker this year. I'm just going to talk this year. His experience as being a Bear. He's an awful kicker, and I would be shocked if the Bears every week don't see who's available on the free agent wire and sitting at home on their couch as far as kickers and auditioning people. And I guarantee at the start of next season that Connor Barth will not be their kicker going into next season. But that has nothing to do with Robbie Gould. Robbie Gould, like I keep mentioning, was cut because he was... There's 3 things. He made a lot of money. He was a headache and outspoken outside the locker room, which makes most head coaches nuts, but just is absolute no-no for John Fox and Ryan Pace. And he was not putting results on the field. If he was only 2 of the 3, he would still be a Bear. If he was cheap but he was not that great and he was a headache, he might still be on this team. If he was hitting all of his field goals and he was outspoken and he was making a lot of money, he'd still be a Bear. If he was just an absolute gem to have and kept everything in-house and was a team favorite and everybody loved him and the coaches raved about him and he was struggling and making a lot of money, he would still be a Bear. It's because he was all 3. It was time for Robbie Gould to go. And Connor Barth, not the answer, but he was somebody available. There were 2 bad kickers. You had to choose one of the bad kickers. Hopefully next year they can right that ship. Another thing, too many bad penalties. I've talked about it before. There was the Jordan Howard face mask that negated that touchdown drive, the long hold that stopped a drive, and the Massey hold at the end of the game. Just too many bad penalties. This defense is not that good. I know statistically they're not so bad, but they need to get to the quarterback. They need to get more turnovers. Those two things. And they need better play from the safety. Safety's got to come up and support better on pass downs. They're okay in the run, but on passing downs, they need to support better. They need to be where they're supposed to be. They can't get faked out. They have to come over the top and either hit people or break plays up or make some interceptions. These defensive backs have to get turnovers because they got no turnovers today. They need to cause turnovers. They need to cause turnovers. They need to cause turnovers because you have to, if you're not far superior in talent to the other team, which the Bears are not, then you need to win the turnover battle to have a chance. And the Bears aren't doing that. They're not causing turnovers. And they need to get to the quarterback. Granted, they held the Colts to only 3 out of 12 and third down conversion, but it didn't seem like that watching. I had to go back and look at that stat. It really seemed like when you're watching the game that the Colts were getting every third down. And on offense they're doing a far improved job over the beginning of the season. They're moving the ball on offense. They're not turning it over very much. Cutting down on turnovers. They're spreading the ball around. They're running the ball more. But the two things the offense needs to do is, one, they need to capitalize on these long drives. They can't just kick field goals. They've got to get touchdowns because their defense isn't good enough to rely solely on field goals. And the other thing is Jordan Howard is really igniting this offense and putting a bolt of lightning up the butt of the offensive line. So why are you only running him like 16 or 17 times a game? He should be getting like 20 to 25 carries a game. Those are imperative. So this Bears team has a lot of things. They've shown a lot of signs of improvement over where they did the first couple weeks. And for the most part, other than that Cowboys game, they've been competitive in every game they've been in. Maybe the second half of that Houston game was not so competitive. But the first half of that Houston game, first 3 quarters of that Houston game, they were right in it. Eagles, back and forth. They beat the Lions. And today, they was back and forth, and they had the opportunity to win it. So the Bears, a few things go differently, and there's a good possibility that the Bears are 4-1 rather than 1-4. But this is the NFL, and that's how things go. So they're 1-4, and they're at the bottom of the league, right there with Cleveland. So they need to keep getting better. They need to get healthier as well, and keep improving because this is a rebuilding team, regardless of what the Bears say. And last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about the Blackhawks. The season starts, I believe, on the 12th. Let me check my handy-dandy schedule that I grabbed when I was at the training camp. Yes, the season starts Wednesday, and they'll be facing the St. Louis Blues. Will be the first game. And St. Louis is a tough team, so it's going to be a great matchup. A few things I want to talk about with the Blackhawks is they are a team that's really gotten hit hard by the salary cap. Most of the time the good teams eventually will hit the salary cap issue because if you're playing well, it means you have good players. Good players that are successful and winning games are going to want bigger contracts. And the more top-end talent you have that are making a lot of money, that means you've got to get cheaper, younger talent to fill in the roster. And after a certain point, you start to you not get the full return on everybody, and you start to deteriorate. And we're running into the end of I think this window of the opportunity for the Blackhawks, unless a few things change. But with Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane making a ton of money, Corey Crawford making a ton of money, a lot of defensemen getting paid, and so on and so forth, if some of these young forwards don't pan out for the Blackhawks, then it's going to be a very, very short window for the Blackhawks to win. So, a few things going into this season are, one, who's going to be the winger on that Jonathan Toews line, that top line. Jonathan Toews, we all know, is one of the best centers in hockey and one of the best two-way centers in hockey. And last year, offensively, that top line struggled. They didn't get a lot of production out of it, partly because Hossa had a little bit of a down year, and Toews offensively wasn't that great. Even though he was still a good player, he just wasn't able to offensively put forward what he needed to. There's rumors that the Blackhawks might break up that sizzling line that they had last year, or that second line, which was Artemi Panarin, Artem Anisimov, and Patrick Kane, and putting Patrick Kane up on that top line and seeing what happens there. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that second line was so good that you need the production. But there's also rumors that they put Panarin up there with Jonathan Toews, and they did that a little tiny bit last year when they did it for 141 total minutes last year, and the Blackhawks during that time got outscored 7-3, and it was all 5-on-5. If you look at it, honestly, is the way Panarin plays and the type of puck movement he has. I think it doesn't really fit so well in with the methodical way that Jonathan Toews plays. So I don't really like that option. And the other option is you could completely change that lineup up and demote Marian Hossa. But I think Hossa had a really nice off-season in the World Cup of Hockey, so I think he's gonna be ready to play for the NHL season, at least for this year, before he starts to drop off and lose some of his ability. So I think you're going to keep those two together. The other option is putting one of the young guys up there and seeing how that goes. So it could be like a Nick Schmaltz or a Tyler Mott, or maybe even a Vinny Hinostroza playing up there on that top line and getting the opportunity. But we shall see. I think the Blackhawks looked at a few options of signing some younger guys so the Blackhawks looked to try to add some talent from outside the organization, but would have come in the cheap, or the cheap-ish. They tried to sign Jimmy Vesey, but he ended up choosing the Rangers over the Blackhawks, which would have been huge for the Blackhawks if they were able to get him, because they would have had to sign him for an entry-level contract. And he's just so talented that, I think he would have worked great there. Jimmy Vesey would have been perfect as a left winger. He could have stepped right in at that Toews line and played right there with Hossa and Toews. Another option that they tried to do was trade with the Houston Oilers for Nail Yakupov, who was the former number 1 overall pick, who hasn't really lived up to the expectations, but he's a really talented guy, and I think playing on an offensive team like the Blackhawks, a caliber team, and with all the talent around like the Blackhawks, I think you really could have gotten the most out of him, but he ultimately got traded to the Blues, so we shall see. So I don't know which way the Blackhawks are going to go, and we'll see come Tuesday or Wednesday what the Blackhawks lines are, but I'm going to guess that they're going to end up being moving one of the young guys in there with Jonathan Toews and see how that goes. What else? What happens if some of these young players in the Blackhawks just don't perform the way that they're expected to, or ultimately just really disappoint? It's that's a real possibility that could happen, because the Blackhawks are building this team on a ton of young talent because they have to. If you look at the salary cap, is over $20 million are being spent on 2 guys, and if you include, if you look at the salary cap, is they've got the salary cap is $73 million, and between Taves and Kane alone, that's $21 million. So that's like a third of your salary cap. It's like a 30% of your salary cap is 2 guys. Then you add in Seabrook is almost $7 million. Crawford is $6 million. Keith is $5.5 million. Hossa is over $5 million. Artem Anisimov is $4.5 million. Hjalmarsson $4 million. Kruger's $3 million. Then you've got to fill the rest of your roster with guys that are making less than $1 million, which is hard to do. So you are really relying on a lot of young talent. And the good thing is, if the Blackhawks, some of these young talent falter, is Rockford is stocked full of other young talent that you can bring up. But, you really are counting on a lot of guys, and the expectations are going to be pretty high for these guys. So you have the likes of like Schmaltz and Mott and Hinestraza, and they've got to really step up and play big. That's, if they don't, this could be a really long, tough season for the Blackhawks and their fans. And ultimately, what are going to be the 3 pairings for the Blackhawks and their defensemen? That's the question. Is last year, having enough defensemen was a struggle for the Blackhawks. It was an absolute struggle. And this year is they seem to they really tighten it up, because they brought in Brian Campbell, who, even though he's older, is really a dependable defenseman and has been in this league a long time, and he's going to be a real stabilizing force in that back end. So you're going to have a healthy Hjalmarsson, a healthy Brent Seabrook, and you're going to bring back Brian Campbell, and hopefully Duncan Keith can recover from some of the knee injuries that he's had and play like we've seen him play the last few years, even though last year was a down year for Duncan Keith. But those are going to be the top 2 pairings, probably Keith, Seabrook, and then Hjalmarsson, Campbell, or some combination of those 4 will be your top 2. And going into it is, I don't know what the Blackhawks fully expected as far as the third pairing is. I think early on it was going to be one of the other young guys, maybe Svedberg, paired with Roosevelt, or Trevor Van Riemsdyk with Michael Roosevelt. But honestly, they got surprisingly good, really good play in the preseason from 2 brand new players. They've got Gustav Forsling and Michael Kempny. Gustav Forsling came here from Sweden, and he was expected to return to Sweden for this whole season and then compete for a big role in the following season, but he stepped up and looked fantastic during the preseason. You have Kempny, who's a 25-year-old Czech defenseman they signed out of the KHL, and he's looking like another major addition to this roster. So this could be a huge decision that Joel Quenneville has to make as far as what they're going to do on that back end, because last year they didn't have a lot of options in that back end. They played a lot of inexperience, and they had to rely on their top 2 lines very heavily and just wore those guys out, and it ultimately cost them. This year, I think they're going to have a lot more options as far as that goes. So, looking at that defenseman is, like I said, is you've got Keith. Right now, you've got Keith, Kempny, Forsling, Roosevelt, Campbell, Seabrook, and Trevor Van Riemsdyk available for that first game on Wednesday. Nick Hjalmarsson, he got a 1-game suspension for a hit he had in the preseason, so he's not going to be available. But after that, it's going to be a tough decision. Do you end up moving one of the two young guys in Kemny or Forsling, who are playing great, elsewhere to make room for? Chalmerson's clearly going to be on the team, or are they going to keep Michael Roosevelt, who's the veteran that, even though he's slow and not that good anymore, he's very dependable, and Joel Quenneville always knows what he's going to expect out of him. He knows where he's supposed to go, where he's supposed to be. It's just he's not going to do anything flashy or make the big play. He's just very dependable. Or if it's going to be Trevor Van Riemsdyk that gets moved down to Rockford. But it's going to be a tough decision for the Blackhawks going forward, because they have enough defensemen now, finally. Depth chart that's looking for opening day or opening game is for your centers is you've got your four: Jonathan Taves, Artem Anisimov, Marcus Kruger, and Nick Schmaltz. And your right wingers is Richard Panik, Patrick Kane, Marian Hossa, Jordan Tutu. Left wing, Artemi Panarin, Tyler Mott, Ryan Hartman, Vinny Hinestraza, and Andrew Desjardins, who could also play center as well if you need him to. So there's going to be a lot of new faces and new positions that people are playing, and the lines, those last two lines, are going to have to get shaken up a lot over what they've been for last year. And then you've got the steady goaltending of Crawford and Darling. But if they get a little bit of a falter on some of these young players, you do also have Dennis Rasmussen, Tanner Caro available. And as far as the defensemen, you've got Ville Poka, Eric Gustafsson, and Victor Svedberg all down there ready to come up as well. And we talked about salary cap before, with this very, very, very top-heavy group, is you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys accounting for most of your salary, is you're finally able to bring in enough youth and cheap contracts to fill out your roster. Is Campbell makes 1.5, and then after that is nobody makes over $925,000 per year, and it ultimately goes down to Scott Darling, who's making $587,000. So you're filling out a lot of cheaper players and a lot of younger players, and you're really going to have to rely on them. So it's going to be an interesting season, and I really hope that Joel Quenneville finally has to learn that he's going to need to rely on younger players in order to make this team successful going forward, and having this window of opportunity for Stanley Cups continue on. With that, I'm going to sign off for this episode, and hopefully by next week we're talking about the Cubs going on to face either the Dodgers or the Nationals. Talking about a really successful first couple of games for the Blackhawks, and hopefully talking a Bears victory. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns that you want to discuss, please hit us up. Twitter @Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. Make sure you're subscribing however you listen to it. iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, whatever. Make sure you hit subscribe, comment, spread the word, tell your friends, tell your moms, tell your brothers, whoever. Thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on the plains.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears. Oh, when the Bears go berry.